Hello everybody, how's it going? I'm Vespillo, and I hope you guys are having a lovely day. Alright, so I wanted to basically make a more full-length response to a question that I got on one of my last videos just about Titanfall 3 in general from Tybalt. He asked me just about basically what's going on. If I thought that they'll update Titanfall 2 in the future, if they're just working on Titanfall 3 right now. And right now, it kind of seems like they're doing neither. They're done with patches for Titanfall 2. We haven't seen or heard from, Respawn about Titanfall 2 in, well, basically since last patch. And just ignore the fact that I have a Kraber here. Just shouldn't have ever picked it up. I don't know what I was thinking. Just was not ready for a Kraber today. So anyway, at E3, we actually saw Vince Zampella for a very short, like 2 to 3 minutes. He was sitting in the crowd and he was basically in this mini interview that asked him what they were working on and if they were ready to tease some stuff. And so I got real excited. I thought, all right, we're going to hear about some Titanfall 3, and then he started talking about Star Wars. I was like, what the hell? They're working on a Star Wars game? And it's not completely a surprise because obviously they've announced a long time ago, they kind of announced very quietly that they're working with LucasArts on some stuff. So LucasArts is obviously a very big, very protective, very reclusive company in some ways, where they do things very carefully, and if they don't do it themselves, they handle absolutely every aspect of game development. So like Respawn making a Star Wars game, and they said it was going to be called like Jedi Fallen Order. So those guys making a LucasArts game that's property of anything dealing with the Star Wars universe is very, very monitored, very organized, very managed. So they do not have a lot of room to mess around. So I think that because of that game, because of Jedi Fallen Order, whatever this game is going to be, they are tied up in every sense of the word. Every developer they have is going to be dedicated to this project, and probably has been for the last, basically since they stopped working on Titanfall 2, and probably even while they were still working on various patches to Titanfall 2. That's just the way it goes when LucasArts gets involved with basically anything that they do, is that they have a certain level of demands that need to be met regardless of what's going on. So to me, that is going to for sure delay Titanfall 3. If Titanfall 3 is even on the horizon, which I don't completely even know, because we just haven't heard anything officially. I'm sure there's some boys out there that are under NDA that have a lot more information than I do, because obviously I've never gotten to go to Respawn or do any of their events or anything like that. That's kind of all we know right now, is that this Jedi game is coming out and that we haven't heard anything about Titanfall 3. So on the other side of that coin, Titanfall 2 did not do as well as Titanfall 1 did. Titanfall 2 actually sold less copies, which for a sequel is pretty bad news. When it comes to a sequel, ideally you want everybody who bought the first one to buy the second one, and then you want all those guys to go out and tell their buddies about the game. You want everything to grow and do better and increase. And then I've seen some articles where Titanfall 2 only sold like 5 to 6 million copies, which is, that in some senses that could easily be considered a failure of a game. So, it may be hard to get out of Titanfall 3. Now, Respawn, obviously, when they formed the company, they were pretty much betting the house on Titanfall 1 being like their new, essentially, Call of Duty, where they put one out every 3 years as a new studio, and that was going to be their main IP, and it was all brand new, and it was going to sort of start a franchise and a legacy. So, Titanfall 2 in that sense was possibly enough of a failure that we got to worry about whether or not we see a Titanfall 3, which we obviously, personally, I hope we do, because I think when you get like a kind of a failure of a game, in a sense, I mean, look, it was a good game, it was fun, it just had some things obviously that I didn't like, but you know, what game doesn't have that shit? So anyway, you can learn a lot more from you know, having a game go bad or doing not as good as you expected. And the main problem with that is obviously selling 5 to 6 million copies sounds really good, but if you're expecting 9 to 10 million, then you probably budget to sell for 9 to 10 million, and you spend an amount on development that assumes you're going to sell at least that many, at least, you know, X number of copies. And if you don't, well, it's going to be kind of considered a failure, regardless of if it seems like a good number or not. Anyway, all that's speculation. So anyway, all that's the long-winded way of saying that I am worried that we will even see a Titanfall 3. But, you know, it's not something I actually know about. But anyway, moving on. I think if the Jedi Order game does well, if it does good, and it kind of keeps Respawn from tanking, you know, obviously if Jedi Order doesn't do well, Respawn's going to be in trouble. If it does do well, then, you know, maybe they'll get another shot to make a game that was as successful as Titanfall 1, but it might have to be a new intellectual property that comes out and smashes record and breaks the market and does all the things that Titanfall 1 did. That's about all we can hope for. So that's one of the main problems to seeing Titanfall 3, is that we got to have Respawn doing really, really good to get another bite at the apple, because things didn't go super great, and it was a little unfortunate that Titanfall well didn't do as good as it, you know, as good as everybody was accepting or expecting, you know. And then there was all that stuff about it got released at the same time as Battlefield 1, which is obviously a die-hard PC franchise that people love and were expecting a lot out of, and people were in general gonna spend more on Battlefield 1 most likely than Titanfall 2. So they kind of cannibalized themselves, because obviously Titanfall 1 came out in the middle of April, and in the middle of April there's not many other releases going on, so you can spend more money on a title, you know, the consumer can spend more money on a title that comes out in the middle of April than they would in the middle of November, when all the other Christmas games are coming out, when Call of Duty's coming out, when, you know, just there's an oversaturation of games in the market. I think it's personally why Battlegrounds did so well, is that it kind of came out in the middle of this like dry spell, like just before the summer hit. And so it started getting big, started picking up momentum. You know, it didn't sell a shit ton of copies day one. People got excited, told their friends, and they, you know, they spread the gospel, and the game got around. And it was a new, fresh, interesting game. So it was a game that people played, had fun, and then wanted to tell their friends about, and wanted to play the game with their friends. So all those things add up, and Titanfall 1 captured on all those things, possibly accidentally, but also, you know, they just had really good timing, and it was a fresh new game that kind of people hadn't seen before, and it felt familiar. It felt like a Call of Duty game, which was cool, and, you know, it just had a lot going for it. And then they just decided that they all of a sudden wanted to compete with the biggest titles on the market for some reason at the most oversaturated time of the year. So I think they can learn a lot from, you know, a bad release of Titanfall 2. They can do a lot better if they do decide to do it again. So I think there's nothing wrong with failing. It's just, as long as they don't repeat their mistakes and screw up some more, you know, they got a good chance. But they're walking a bit of a tightrope right now, I think. Titanfall 2 kind of put them in a bit of a shitty situation. And the most messed up thing is when you talk to other people about Titanfall 2, they're like, oh yeah, Titanfall 2, that was a really underrated game. Seemed really great. Seemed awesome. But like, if you play it, there's a lot wrong with it. even though people look at it and talk about it really fondly. Like, yeah, they did so many cool things and they did all this great stuff. The campaign was awesome. The multiplayer action is fast and smooth, and you know, it's all the things most gamers want in a game, but for some reason they're just not playing it. The low player base was obviously a problem, but you know, again, everybody sits there and talks about how good a game it is and how underrated it is, but nobody plays it. So, yeah, that's just kind of my guesses and suppositions and assumptions and totally not based on fact opinions. And that's kind of just what's happening with the game in general and where I think it's going. But, you know, only time will tell. I could be completely wrong about a lot of this shit. And in fact, I probably am, but anyway, I had to upload this game because this dude at the end was getting super salty. He started typing in chat like his name was Tighten Up Dog or something. Anyway, I'm just going to let the rest of this game play out. Hope you guys enjoy, and thank you so much for watching.
Advise cover. You are being engaged by multiple Titans, 40mm armed. Salvo core ready. Eject immediately. Salvo core activated.
Keep it together! Stay in formation! Eyes forward! Hostile pilot in sight! Get ready, what the hell is that? Heads up! We lost the monster! Critical damage. Take evasive action.